The effort to sustain the Graham Platner campaign, no more. But that doesn't mean that he's going to walk away, or at least not without extracting something. That's what the executive director of the main Democrat Party is openly complaining about. They're trying to set up a process for replacement, but the Platner team wants input into who the replacement would be, even as there has been no announcement that he is stepping aside. And really, what's the incentive for him to step aside? What's he going to make a comeback down the road in state or federal politics? He'll return to ignominy where he frankly belongs. And that should have been obvious to anybody who was paying even passing attention. But, you know, the pursuit of political power can be blinding, willfully so. This was how the that party's ecosystem was attempting to guide Platner's efforts after the New York Times expose, in quotation marks, as we've discussed, soft catch and kill, a month ago. So after they knew everything except the Jenny Rassicot rape allegation that came out over the weekend, but even some of them knew that. Certainly, it would appear the New York Times did, based on what Lindsay Fifield has disclosed, one of the other accusers. Here's how they were handling it. Good example, Jen Psaki. Now, she's had a lot of practice because she was, flacking for Biden all that time, too. And she's hardly alone. This is the type of interviews that were being done in Platner to try to buoy his chances.
There's going to be more coming at you. Has your campaign, I'm just putting my own campaign operative hat on here. Has your campaign been working to figure out what an opposition file with any additional allegations might have in it? Do you know that on your end? Have you thought about it?
Oh, I've thought about it extensively. I mean, here's the thing. I've lived my life. I was there the whole time. Much of the allegations that have come out as of late are literally just lies. And so, I don't really, they've already gotten to the point where they're moving into just making things up. And if we're already there, I don't know what else they're going to make up, because I don't know what's going around in the very weird minds of Republican operatives. And so the idea that they're going to try to scare me out of this race is rather laughable.
That's certainly what they're trying to do. And even that threat of trying to Biden you, as they're calling it, is certainly part of that.
Is that what they're trying to do? Like his former campaign staffer that left amid the first round of allegations? Jen Psaki, not particularly intellectually curious, but a more intellectually curious interviewer might have said, they're making stuff up. Well, what stuff are they making up? What allegation that's been lodged against you is untrue, is made up? And this is all coming from Republican operatives? John Favreau, Obama soy boy, similarly intellectually uncurious.
Have you had conversations with people who are skeptical about all the tattoo stuff or any of the old Reddit posts or any of that?
Oh yeah,
stuff?
I mean,
How do those go?
They go great. I mean, it's because I explain it, and frankly, most people are like, that all sounds eminently reasonable.
Sure. Who are the people that you explain this to, and they come away saying that's eminently reasonable? When you come up with lines like, a dark period when I was young making Reddit posts, I was 36. Making statements about whatever, masturbatory fantasies about porta potties and blacks being bad tippers and all sorts of other observations, calling myself a communist. I was a snot-nosed kid at 36. It was a dark period in my life. And, what guys do in dark periods of their life is they get a SS tattoo on their chest. It's just what guys do. Real men do this. I can't wait for Andrew Gillum. Do you see Andrew Gillum, who came within a whisker of being the governor of Florida in 2018? DeSantis only beat him by 34,000 votes, former mayor of Tallahassee. Incredible. Could you imagine first of all, how big a bullet Florida dodged? Could you imagine the different trajectory of that state had Andrew Gillum won? He got picked up for drug possession and whatnot in Bama. This was after he had already sort of, melted down a couple years earlier, he got picked up for having drugs and being in the company of a male prostitute in Miami. Then he sort of disappeared from the scene. I'm looking forward to his redemption story. It's coming. I know it's coming. A couple election cycles, he'll make a very public conversion to Mamdaniism. He'll, make a very public statement about his newfound sobriety. And, he'll say, like, his dalliances with male prostitutes. That's the version of his Nazi tattoo. Just a dark time in his life. And, in dark times and real guys' lives, they, engage the services of male prostitutes. I mean, that's just what guys do, real men. And it's Republican operatives making up lies, casting Graham Platner in a bad light. It's really something. Meanwhile, these the great moral voices in the movement, the people who just call balls and strikes, like Bill Maher, is real independent minded. He's willing to criticize the left, so that makes him an honest broker, as opposed to somebody who just wants the left to be more successful, as I'm always reminding people who platform Bill Maher. This is what Bill Maher said a couple weeks ago about Platner.
And then, of course, there's the Nazi tattoo on his chest. I mean, seriously, this guy's whole life is the movie The Hangover. He doesn't need a term in the Senate. He needs a gap year in Costa Rica. And yet, I would still urge the folks in Maine to vote for him. For two reasons. One, we need to restore balance in our government, and a Democratic Senate would help a lot with that. And two, get used to it. America is a country filled with a lot of broken, horribly educated, phone-addicted, sort of nutty people. And as long as we live in a representative democracy, we are always electing our reflection in the mirror. I wish
so. We should just concede the cacistocracy, I guess. Bill Maher's bootstrapped excuse for supporting Platner. Yeah. Just give up on having people that are redeemable in the United States Senate. I got you. Very compelling stuff. David Drucker is a senior writer for The Dispatch. He's also the author of In Trump's Shadow, The Battle for 2024 and the Future of the GOP. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to be here.
So the Platner saga, I mean, is he going to get out or maybe he stays? Why not?
I don't know. Look, I'm not convinced he's going to get out. What's he going to do? And look, let's back up a minute. What I find ironic here is that the guy that complains incessantly about all the rigging that goes on in American politics is now trying to rig his exit and rig the replacement. And
right.
And I will tell you, it's a bipartisan affliction. The people that complain about the rigging the most do the most rigging, or at least as much as they can get away with. So we'll see what he does. This is the first time I've ever seen him contrite, seen him appear to recognize the gravity of the political situation he's in. He's canceled a bunch of events, a bunch of fundraisers. You're not, getting to find videos from him. So he would appear as though he's on his way out, but I'm not convinced he is. And, the people closest to him in terms of his advisors, I would guess don't want him to drop out. For a lot of those left-wingers or, far-left Democrats, they hate the Democratic Party more than they hate Republicans. And I don't think they care much whether they beat Susan Collins. What they care is whether or not they beat the Democratic establishment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that, but we're seeing that happen all over. And it's not just on the East Coast. It's centered in the Midwest. I'm talking about it a bit earlier in the show. Francesca Hong, leading candidate for governor for the Democrat side in Wisconsin. She's an abolish ICE. Police are a vestige of white supremacy kind of DSA candidate. Obviously, El Sayed, the leading Senate candidate for that party in Michigan. DSA just endorsed Cori Bush to join the caucus again in Congress representing St. Louis. I mean, there's a lot of this happening where it's this idea that, as Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, I think wants it to be, that there's a hash out in terms of what the party believes that's coming in advance of the midterms. I think it's been hashed out and not to his favor.
I don't think it's been hashed out yet. I think this debate's actively happening. I think the difference is that the populist wing of the Democratic Party, candidates and operatives and activists that define themselves as socialists, but some that don't, that say they're not socialists, they're just progressives, are much more numerous than they used to be. They're much more active than they used to be. They've actually nominated, and in some cases elected, candidates that are appealing and charismatic and likable. I mean, I'm in Michigan right now, and I was at that debate last night between Dr. El Sayed and Haley Stevens, the sitting congresswoman for the Senate seat here.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, the guy is a very good political athlete. Whatever you think of his views, he is good at being a politician, and that's something that this wing of the party for a long time didn't have.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't come across like rabid, like a Rashida Tlaib, but by the same token, just saying you didn't say something that you said, like I didn't say abolish ICE, here is you saying abolish ICE, not that impressive. His sort of fork-tongued answers about Israel's right to exist, since he's so obsessed with AIPAC and the AIPAC and Jewish-oriented conspiracies he's soft-pedaling, I mean, that's not the most skilled presentation I've ever seen. Maybe it impresses his primary voters, but I think he makes the race very plausible for Mike Rogers if he's the nominee.
Yeah, it's possible. In theory, that's the case. I know Republicans believe that. And I think you're right in the way you assess the way he bobs and weaves when it comes to these positions, right? But like I have seen over the past 10 years, politicians like that do extremely well.
Yeah, true.
And in part, it's because at the end of the day, you know, he boils down his message to getting money out of politics, putting money in your pocket. I'm quoting him now, and passing Medicare for all. And people love the idea that everything wrong in politics has to do with corporate cash and sending money overseas. Look, this was one of the things that helped Trump's rise to the Republican Party, at least in terms of the signals it sent, is that the whole system was corrupt and we're sending all this money overseas and I'm going to fix the corruption. And so you are right. And in fact, in the gaggle yesterday, I asked Dr. El Sayed about his views on Israel. You know, he was accusing Haley Stevens of supporting Israel because of AIPAC and because of corporate money. And I said, isn't it possible she just supports Israel and that the people who also support Israel are therefore donating to her campaign? And he won't move off of this position that, no, this is all about money. And so that's where he is. But the way he presents himself, the way he really simplifies the message when he's in control of it can be very effective. We don't know if he'll win the primary yet. We don't know if he'll win a general election if he's the nominee. My point is, in a cycle like 2022 or 2014, there's no way this kind of candidate wins in Michigan. But in a 2018 or a 2026, you cannot rule it out.
And would you say the same thing about Tallarico in Texas? That's really in play, or is it more like Ted Cruz and Colin Allred, where it's like it's not really in play like you think it is? It won't be a blowout, but it's still Texas, and Ted Cruz is going to win by 5 to 7 points, and that's just how it's going to be. What do you think here with Tallarico?
So I think 2018 and the race against Beto O'Rourke is a better comparison. It was a really strong Democratic cycle. The Cruz campaign, I know from covering that race closely, was exceedingly worried, and it was, in fact, a really close race. At the end of the day, Texas is a Republican-leaning state, often a very strong Republican state. That helped save Cruz. Michigan is a swing state. Texas is a Republican-leaning state. I would still say that because of the cycle we're in, which is a strong Democratic cycle, and because Ken Paxton is such a flawed candidate with so much scandal and baggage, that Tallarico is going to make this thing competitive. I still bet on Ken Paxton to win because of the makeup of the state, but you can't rule out an upset the way you could 2 years ago and even 2 years before that.
From a political perspective, with the Trump announcement that the ceasefire is effectively over, but the MOU is effectively on the shelf right now after the strikes that were launched yesterday, which Trump changed his tune on, those were not proportional. Those were for punishment. Those, his description. Not happy with the Iranians and what they're doing in the Strait. And the story in part was Hegseth and Rubio got to him at the NATO conference in Turkey and convinced him to launch these strikes. J.D. Vance not there, and one wonders, exactly what the dynamic is between the senior leadership as it pertains to Iranian strategy here, and how much of a wild card this could turn out to be if we have fits and starts and things look like they're tracking one way and calming down, and all of a sudden hostilities spike up, and so do oil prices, and we're back where we were just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, look, I think it's hard at this point to know where this is going to go because Trump changes his mind from week to week. And he just does. You look at the course of the war leading up to the MOU announcement, and every other week there was a deal or wasn't a deal. We're going to bomb them into oblivion. We're not going to bomb them into oblivion. I don't know where Trump is going to be 4 days from now. It's clear that Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance approached this differently, but we didn't need the Iran war to know that they approach these things differently. It all comes down to Trump, and I think sometimes Trump is in a bombing mood. I think at other times he's looking at the stock market and the bond market and the interest rates, and he just wants this thing to be over. And he hasn't made he's never made a really sustained, cogent case to the American public. Tried to bring along Congress, tried to bring along our allies. He's just kind of acted as a guy alone. So it's hard for me to tell you where this is going. I mean, I will say the war, which I think there's a great case for, does put pressure on oil prices, which puts pressure on inflation across a range of consumer goods, not just gas in your car. And look, that theoretically makes it tougher for Republicans in November.
Just one more aspect of the Platner story. I got to get your comment on the New York Times and that arguable soft catch and kill that I certainly argue it. They did with the story they did a month ago, and how they seemingly leveraged what they knew Jenny Rassicot was going to allege to sort of diminish that and accentuate the Lindsay Fifield accusations that were more easily challenged by political operatives on the left. Just and even Michelle Goldberg is sort of offering sort of some half-assed mea culpa right now in the New York Times. But what you think about the journalistic practices as evinced by the way they handle the Platner thing over the last couple of months?
Well, look, I mean, I haven't dissected all of these stories, and I know people, and I know people have a lot of opinions. I think that we wouldn't know about any of this without the reporting of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and I think the Wall Street Journal. There are local outlets in Maine that have done a lot of reporting. I know that Fifield went on the record, and Rossico initially did not. And as a reporter, I mean, I'm hamstrung all the time by what people will tell me on the record versus what they will not. And when I'm dealing with serious allegations like sexual assault, I can't do background reporting. I just won't do it. So I am not hereby declaring that the New York Times handling of this was pristine because I've been too busy doing my own reporting on my own stories. What I will tell you is that Lindsay Fifield's allegations should have been damning enough for the party to throw Platner overboard, and the party chose not to. The Roscoe allegations were of a measure worse in terms of how most people look at this because one was sort of sexual misconduct and one was rape. Mm-hmm. But I think the spotlight should be on how the party handled this, as though all of Platner's ethical baggage and the sexual misconduct that we knew about wasn't enough, that it took this. And so it's, on the one hand, good that it took this, but it shouldn't have taken this. And that, I think, is what Michelle Goldberg was getting at, which is we were all explaining this away, and it should have been a signal that this guy was a bad guy. I will tell you, Dan, I mean, I've been doing this now for 25 years. I mean, in the last 10, 15 years in particular, voters on both sides of the aisle have been, and it's the voters, by the way, who nominated and gravitated to Platner, even when they knew about the Nazi tattoo and the Reddit posts and all of that. But voters on both sides of the aisle have looked past scandal and baggage and just said the other side's evil. I want somebody who's going to fight for me. People are imperfect. So they care about the scandal of their opponents. They don't care about the scandal of their own candidates.
Yeah, there are degrees to that, but you're right. I mean, that's certainly an element. David Drucker, senior writer for The Dispatch, author of In Trump's Shadow, The Battle for 2024 and the Future of the GOP. David, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Yep, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. And you join us in the fwealthgroup.com answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
SES Americom Incorporated CX Team Systems Integration Testing Engineer,